Welcome to Dreamtale Sleep Stories. Tonight's reading is The Seasick Viking. Settle into your bed or sofa and let your shoulders, jaw, and eyelids grow heavy. Inhale slowly, 1, 2, 3, and sigh the air away, allowing the day to fade into quiet dark. With every soft inhale, you invite fresh English phrases. With every gentle exhale, stray thoughts drift farther off. Behind my voice flows a gentle theta wave melody, renowned for guiding the mind toward deep relaxation. Soon the music will shift into soothing alpha wave tones, carrying you toward a calm shoreline of dreams. Keep your eyes closed or follow the captions, whichever feels right. Simply receive the rhythm and resonance of the language. Deep in rest, tonight's phrases will take root like seeds, ready to bloom into stronger English skills with the morning light. When you feel settled, hold that unhurried breath and allow yourself to drift into the tale. The Seasick Viking begins now, and when the story's final line has faded, the music will linger a little longer, carrying you gently deeper into sleep. The Seasick Viking. Eric was an 18-year-old Viking who had a terrible secret. While all the other young men in his village dreamed of sailing across the dangerous seas to find treasure and glory, Eric couldn't even step onto a boat without feeling sick to his stomach. His father, Magnus the Bold, was the most famous ship captain in their village. Magnus had sailed to England, Ireland, and even distant lands that most people had only heard about in stories. The walls of their house were covered with shields, swords, and golden treasures that Magnus had brought back from his adventures. Every morning, Magnus would wake up early and walk down to the harbor to check on his ship, the Sea Wolf. The ship was painted bright blue and red, with a carved wooden dragon head at the front that looked fierce and proud. Eric would watch his father from their house on the hill, wishing he could feel excited about sailing instead of worried. "Eric," his father called one sunny morning, "come down to the harbor. Today we're going to practice sailing in the small boat." Eric's stomach immediately felt heavy, like he had swallowed a large stone. He had tried sailing with his father many times before, and it always ended the same way. Within minutes of leaving the dock, Eric would turn green and spend the rest of the trip hanging over the side of the boat. "I'm coming, father," Eric replied, though he walked as slowly as possible toward the harbor. The harbor was busy that morning. Fishermen were bringing in their nets full of silver fish, and children were playing games on the wooden docks. Eric's best friend Bjorn was there too, helping his uncle repair a fishing boat. "Good luck, Eric," Bjorn called out with a big smile. "Maybe today will be different." Eric wished he could share Bjorn's optimism, but he knew better. He had inherited many things from his father: his height, his strength, and his skill with a sword. But unfortunately, he had not inherited his father's ability to sail without getting sick. Magnus was waiting beside their small practice boat, which bobbed gently in the calm water. "Today we're just going to sail around the bay," he said encouragingly. "The water is very calm, and we won't go far from shore." Eric nodded and carefully stepped into the boat. For the first few minutes, everything seemed fine. The boat moved smoothly through the water, and Eric began to hope that maybe this time would be different. His father pointed out different landmarks on the shore and explained how to read the wind direction. But then, the boat hit a small wave, and Eric felt his stomach begin to turn. Another wave rocked the boat from side to side, and Eric gripped the sides tightly. His face began to turn pale, then green. "Father," Eric said weakly, "I think we should go back to shore." Magnus looked at his son with concern and sadness. He had been hoping that Eric would eventually overcome his seasickness, but it seemed to be getting worse instead of better. "Of course, son," Magnus said gently, turning the boat back toward the harbor. "We'll try again another day." But as they sailed back to shore, both father and son knew that Eric would never be able to join the other Vikings on their sea adventures. It was a disappointment that neither of them talked about, but both of them felt deeply. That evening, the village held a meeting in the Great Hall. The hall was a large wooden building where everyone gathered for important discussions, celebrations, and storytelling. Eric sat in the back with the other young men, listening as the village elder, Old Gunnar, stood up to speak. "My friends," Gunnar said in his deep, serious voice, "I have received troubling news from the traders who came through our village yesterday. They say that wolves have been attacking the farms in the northern valley, and the farmers are asking for our help." The room filled with worried whispers. The northern valley was important to their village because that's where they got much of their food during the winter months. If the wolves continued to attack the farms, there might not be enough food for everyone. "What kind of help do they need?" asked Magnus. "They need someone to travel through the darkwood forest to reach the northern valley," Gunnar said. "The usual path along the coast has been blocked by landslides after the big storm last week. The forest path is dangerous, but it's the only way to get there quickly." All the young men in the hall looked excited about the possibility of an adventure. They whispered to each other about the stories they had heard about Darkwood Forest, tales of strange creatures, hidden treasures, and ancient magic. "I'll go," shouted Bjorn, jumping to his feet. "I'm not afraid of some wolves." "And I'll go too," called out another young man named Olaf. But Old Gunnar shook his head. "This is not a job for a group of young warriors," he said. "The forest paths are narrow and confusing. Too many people would make too much noise and get lost. We need someone who is clever, quiet, and good at solving problems on their own." Eric felt a strange stirring in his chest. Unlike sailing, this sounded like something he might actually be good at. He had always been good at finding his way through the forests around their village, and he was known for being quiet and thoughtful, rather than loud and aggressive like many of the other young Vikings. But before Eric could say anything, his father stood up. "I volunteer to go," Magnus announced. "I have experience with dangerous journeys." "No, Magnus," said Gunnar. "You are needed here to organize the fishing boats for the winter. We need someone younger, someone who can move quickly through the forest and won't be missed if they're gone for several days." Eric took a deep breath and stood up. His heart was beating fast, but for the first time in months, it wasn't because he felt sick. It was because he felt excited. "I'll go," Eric said, though his voice came out quieter than he had intended. The hall fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Eric with surprise. They all knew about his problems with sailing, and many of them thought of him as the son who couldn't follow in his father's footsteps. "Are you sure, Eric?" asked Gunnar kindly. "The Darkwood Forest is full of challenges. There are no clear paths, and people say that strange creatures live there." "I'm sure," Eric said, more loudly this time. "I know the forests around our village better than anyone. I'm good at finding my way, and I'm not afraid of the dark or strange noises." Magnus looked at his son with a mixture of pride and worry. "Eric," he said, "this is very different from walking in the forests near our village. The Darkwood is vast and dangerous." "I know, Father," Eric replied, "but someone has to help the farmers, and I think I'm the right person for this job." Old Gunnar nodded slowly. "Very well, Eric. If you're willing to make this journey, then we accept your offer. You'll leave tomorrow morning with supplies and a message for the farmers. But remember, if you get into trouble, there will be no one there to help you." That night, Eric couldn't sleep. He was excited about finally having a chance to prove himself, but he was also nervous about traveling alone through a forest that even experienced Vikings avoided. His mother, Astrid, helped him pack supplies for the journey. "Take this," she said, handing him a small wooden amulet carved with protective symbols. "Your grandmother gave this to me when I was young. It's supposed to protect travelers on dangerous journeys." Eric hugged his mother tightly. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll be careful, and I'll come back with good news from the farmers." Early the next morning, Eric set off toward the Darkwood Forest. The village gathered to wish him luck, and even his father gave him an encouraging pat on the shoulder. "Remember," Magnus said, "being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what needs to be done, even when you are afraid." The walk to the edge of the Darkwood took most of the morning. Eric had been to the edge of the forest before, but he had never gone deep inside it. The trees were much taller and thicker than the ones near his village, and they grew so close together that very little sunlight reached the ground. Eric took out his compass and checked his direction. The northern valley was about 2 days' walk through the forest, if he could find the right path. He had a map that old Gunnar had drawn for him, but it was very simple and didn't show much detail. As Eric entered the forest, he noticed how different everything sounded. Instead of the familiar sounds of seagulls and waves, he heard the hooting of owls, the rustling of small animals in the underbrush, and the creaking of tree branches in the wind. For the first few hours, Eric felt confident. He was able to follow what seemed like an old path, and he made good progress toward the north. But as the day went on, the path became less and less clear. By afternoon, Eric realized that he was no longer following a path at all. He was just walking between trees and hoping he was still going in the right direction. As the sun began to set, Eric decided to make camp for the night. He found a small clearing where he could build a fire and set up his sleeping blanket. As he gathered wood for the fire, he heard a strange noise coming from the trees nearby. It sounded like someone or something was walking through the forest, stepping on twigs and pushing through bushes. But the footsteps were too heavy to belong to a normal person, and too slow to belong to an animal running away. Eric stood very still and listened carefully. The footsteps stopped, and then he heard a deep, rumbling voice speaking words he couldn't understand. The voice definitely didn't belong to any human. Eric's heart began to beat faster, but he tried to remember his father's words about being brave. He picked up a thick stick to use as a weapon and slowly walked toward the sound. "Hello?" Eric called out, trying to make his voice sound strong and confident. "Who's there?" The rustling stopped completely, and the forest became silent. Then Eric heard the deep voice again, but this time it spoke in his language. "Human boy," the voice said, "what are you doing in my forest?" Eric looked around but couldn't see anyone. "I'm traveling to the Northern Valley to help some farmers," he said. "I don't want to cause any trouble." Suddenly, a huge figure stepped out from behind a thick tree trunk. Eric gasped and took a step backward. The creature was at least 8 feet tall, with long, shaggy hair, enormous hands, and eyes that glowed yellow in the dim light. Eric realized he was looking at a troll, one of the mythical creatures that his grandmother used to tell stories about. "A troll," Eric whispered, more amazed than frightened. "Yes, human boy, I am a troll," the creature said with what might have been a smile. "My name is Grimjaw. This forest has been my home for over 200 years." Eric remembered the stories his grandmother had told him about trolls. Some were dangerous and ate people, but others were just lonely creatures who wanted to be left alone. Grimjaw didn't seem particularly angry or threatening. Mostly, he seemed curious. "I'm Eric," he said, lowering his stick. "I'm sorry for disturbing your forest. I'm just trying to find the fastest way to the Northern Valley." Grimjaw scratched his head with one enormous finger. "The Northern Valley, you say? That's a long way from here, human boy. And you're walking in the wrong direction." Eric's heart sank. "Wrong direction? But I've been following my compass north all day." "Compasses don't work well in the Darkwood," Grimjaw explained. "Too much iron in the rocks underground. Most humans who come into my forest get lost and wander around for days before finding their way out." "Then how am I supposed to reach the Northern Valley?" Eric asked, feeling discouraged. Grimjaw was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Why do you need to go there, human boy? What's so important in the Northern Valley?" Eric explained about the wolf attacks and how the farmers needed help. He also told Grimjaw about his village and how everyone was depending on him to get through the forest successfully. "Ah," said Grimjaw, nodding his huge head. "So you're on a mission to help others. That's very different from the usual humans who come into my forest looking for treasure or trying to prove how brave they are. Will you help me find the right way?" Eric asked hopefully. Grimjaw smiled, showing teeth that were larger than Eric's thumbs. I know these forests better than anyone, human boy. I can tell you how to reach the Northern Valley. But first, you must help me with a problem of my own. What kind of problem? Eric asked. For the past month, something has been stealing food from my winter storage cave, Grimjaw explained. Every few days, I find that more of my preserved fish and dried berries have disappeared. I've tried to catch the thief, but I'm too big and clumsy to move quietly through the forest. Eric understood immediately. You need someone smaller and quieter to help you catch the thief. Exactly, Grimjaw said, clapping his hands together with a sound like thunder. If you help me solve this mystery, I'll guide you safely to the Northern Valley. Eric agreed to help, and Grimjaw led him to a large cave hidden behind a waterfall. The cave was filled with piles of dried fish, berries, nuts, and other foods that Grimjaw had been collecting for the winter. The thief always comes at night, Grimjaw explained. I'll hide outside the cave while you hide inside and watch for whoever is taking my food. Eric found a good hiding spot behind a large rock inside the cave. He could see the entrance clearly, but he was well hidden from view. Grimjaw went outside to wait, and Eric settled down to watch and listen. For several hours, nothing happened. Eric began to feel sleepy, but he forced himself to stay alert. Just after midnight, he heard small scratching sounds coming from the back of the cave. Eric looked toward the back of the cave and saw something that surprised him completely. A family of small bears, a mother and two cubs, had entered the cave through a tiny opening that was too small for Grimjaw to notice. The mother bear was carefully selecting the best fish and berries and putting them into a natural pouch formed by her folded arms. The cubs stayed close to their mother, occasionally snacking on a berry or two. Eric realized that the bears weren't stealing food to be mean or greedy. The mother bear was trying to find food for her cubs before winter arrived. She had probably lost her usual food sources when humans started building farms in areas where bears used to hunt and gather. Eric made a decision. Instead of calling for Grimjaw to come and chase away the bears, he quietly approached the mother bear. "Hello," he whispered softly. "Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you." The mother bear looked up at Eric with surprise and fear. She quickly moved to protect her cubs, but she didn't run away. "I know you're just trying to find food for your family," Eric continued in his gentlest voice. "Let me help you." Eric slowly reached into his own pack and took out some of the dried meat and bread that his mother had packed for his journey. He placed the food on the ground between himself and the bears. "Take this too," he said, "and don't worry. I'll talk to Grimjaw. Maybe we can work out a solution that helps everyone." The mother bear cautiously approached the food that Eric had offered. She sniffed it carefully, then began to eat. The cubs followed their mother's lead and began eating as well. After a few minutes, Eric heard Grimjaw's heavy footsteps approaching the cave entrance. "Eric?" Grimjaw called out. "Did you catch the thief?" "Yes," Eric replied, "but it's not what you think. Come in, but please move very slowly and quietly." Grimjaw squeezed through the cave entrance and saw Eric sitting peacefully near the family of bears. His eyes widened with surprise. "Bears," he said. "I should have known, but why haven't they run away from me?" "Because they're hungry," Eric explained. "The mother bear is trying to find food for her cubs before winter. She's not stealing to be mean. She's just trying to take care of her family." Grimjaw looked at the bears with new understanding. "I never thought about it that way," he said. "I was so angry about my missing food that I didn't think about why someone might need it." Eric stood up slowly so he wouldn't startle the bears. "What if we made an arrangement?" he suggested. "What if you shared some of your extra food with the bear family, and in return, they could help you gather more food for next winter?" Bears are excellent at finding berry bushes and fishing spots. Grimjaw scratched his head again, thinking about Eric's suggestion. "That's actually a very good idea, human boy. I do have more food than I need for just myself, and I could use help gathering food in places that are too small for me to reach." The mother bear seemed to understand what Eric and Grimjaw were discussing. She made soft grunting sounds and nudged her cubs toward the cave entrance. "I think she's saying thank you," Eric said with a smile. From that night on, Grimjaw and the bear family became partners instead of enemies. The bears showed Grimjaw where to find the best berries and helped him catch fish in narrow streams. In return, Grimjaw shared his cave and his food supplies. The next morning, Grimjaw kept his promise to Eric. He guided Eric through the safest and fastest paths in the Darkwood Forest, pointing out landmarks and teaching him how to navigate without a compass. "Remember, human boy," Grimjaw said as they walked, "the secret to traveling through difficult places is not to fight against them, but to understand them and work with them." After 2 days of traveling with Grimjaw as his guide, Eric finally reached the Northern Valley. The farms were scattered across a beautiful green valley, surrounded by mountains. Eric could see sheep and cattle grazing in the fields, and smoke rising from the chimneys of several farmhouses. Eric said goodbye to Grimjaw and walked down into the valley to find the farmers. The first farmhouse he came to belonged to a family named the Ericksons. The farmer, Ole Erickson, was surprised to see a young Viking walking out of the Darkwood Forest. "Are you the help that our village sent for?" Ole asked hopefully. "Yes," Eric replied. "I'm here to help you with your wolf problem." Ole invited Eric into his house and introduced him to his wife, Ingrid, and their 3 children. Over a warm meal of bread and stew, Ole explained the situation with the wolves. "They started attacking our sheep about a month ago," Ole said. "At first, it was just 1 or 2 wolves, but now there's a whole pack of them. They come at night and take our animals. We've tried everything we can think of, but nothing works." "Have you seen the wolves yourself?" Eric asked. "Yes," said Ingrid. "They're larger than normal wolves, and they seem more organized. It's like they're being led by something intelligent." Eric remembered his experience with the bears and Grimjaw. "Maybe the wolves aren't attacking your farms because they're mean," he said. "Maybe they're just hungry and looking for food." Ole shook his head. "But wolves usually hunt deer and other wild animals. Why would they suddenly start attacking farm animals?" Eric asked to see where the wolf attacks had happened. Ole led him out to the sheep pasture, where Eric could see the tracks and signs of the wolf pack. As he examined the area, Eric noticed something interesting. The wolf tracks led toward the mountains, but they also led toward an area where the forest had been cut down. Eric realized that the farmers had recently cleared a large section of forest to create more pasture land for their animals. "Ole," Eric said, "how long ago did you clear this forest area?" "About 2 months ago," Ole replied. "We needed more space for our sheep before winter." Eric nodded. "I think I understand what's happening. When you cleared the forest, you probably destroyed the hunting grounds where the wolves used to find deer and other prey. Now they're hungry and desperate, so they're taking your sheep because it's the only food they can find." "So what can we do?" Ole asked. "We can't give up our farmland, but we can't let the wolves keep taking our animals either." Eric thought about the solution he had found for Grimjaw and the bears. "What if we could find a way for the wolves to get the food they need without taking your sheep?" he suggested. That evening, Eric met with all the farmers in the valley to discuss the wolf problem. He explained his theory about why the wolves were attacking their farms, and he proposed a solution. "What if we work together to create a new hunting area for the wolves?" Eric suggested. "We could leave some sections of forest uncut, and we could even help the wolves by leaving out food scraps and bones from butchering." Some of the farmers thought Eric's idea was crazy. "Feed the wolves?" said one farmer. "That will just make them come around our farms more often." But Ole spoke up in support of Eric's plan. "This young man walked through the dark wood forest by himself to come and help us," he said. "I think we should listen to his ideas." Eric spent the next 3 days working with the farmers to implement his plan. They identified several areas of forest that could be left wild for the wolves to hunt in. They also set up feeding stations far away from the farms where they could leave food scraps for the wolves. Most importantly, Eric suggested that they work with the wolves instead of against them. "Wolves are very intelligent," he explained. "If we show them that we're willing to share the valley with them, they might be willing to stay away from your farms." The plan worked better than anyone had expected. Within a week, the wolf attacks on the farms stopped completely. The wolves found plenty of food in their new hunting areas, and they seemed to understand that the farms were off limits. After 2 weeks in the Northern Valley, Eric was ready to return home. The farmers were so grateful for his help that they loaded him with gifts: wheels of cheese, dried meat, and even a beautiful wool blanket that Ingrid had woven herself. "You saved our farms," Ole said as he shook Eric's hand goodbye. "We'll never forget what you did for us." The journey back through the dark wood forest was much easier now that Eric knew the way. Grimjaw met him at the halfway point and helped guide him back to the edge of the forest. "You did well, human boy," Grimjaw said as they said goodbye. "You learned the most important lesson of the forest, that the best way to solve problems is to understand them first." When Eric finally arrived back at his village, he found a crowd waiting for him at the harbor. Word had spread that he was returning from his mission, and everyone wanted to hear about his adventures. Eric told the whole village about his journey through the Darkwood Forest, his friendship with Grimjaw, the troll, his solution to the bear problem, and his success in stopping the wolf attacks on the farms. The villagers listened with amazement and pride. "My son," said Magnus, putting his arm around Eric's shoulders, "you have proven that there are many different ways to be brave and to serve your community. You may not be a sailor, but you are something just as valuable. You are a peacemaker and a problem solver." Old Gunnar stood up and addressed the crowd. "Eric has shown us that courage comes in many forms," he announced. "From now on, whenever our village faces problems that require wisdom and understanding rather than strength and fighting, we will know who to ask for help." That night, the village held a great celebration in Eric's honor. They told stories, sang songs, and shared the delicious food that the farmers had sent back with Eric. For the first time in his life, Eric felt truly proud of himself and confident about his place in the village. As the celebration continued into the night, Eric stepped outside to look at the stars and think about his adventure. His friend Bjorn came out to join him. "I have to admit," Bjorn said, "I was jealous when you got chosen for the mission to the Northern Valley. I wanted to be the one to have an exciting adventure." Eric smiled. "I was scared the whole time," he said, "but I learned something important. Being afraid doesn't mean you can't do brave things. It just means you have to find your own way to be brave." "And you found your way," Bjorn said. "You saved the farms, made friends with a troll, and became a hero. That's better than any sea adventure." Eric looked out at the harbor, where his father's ship bobbed gently in the moonlight. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel sad or embarrassed when he looked at the ship. He had found his own path to adventure and success, and it was just as valuable as his father's path. From that day forward, Eric became known throughout the region as someone who could solve difficult problems through understanding and cooperation, rather than fighting. He never did overcome his seasickness, but he didn't need to. He had found his own way to be a true Viking, not through sailing and raiding, but through wisdom, courage, and compassion. And whenever young people in the village felt discouraged because they couldn't do what everyone expected of them, their parents would tell them the story of Eric the Seasick Viking, who found his own path to greatness.